Watch right now in the project. Front news. Russia is on fire. Drones are hitting Moscow and the whole country. There will be even more explosions. The fruitful Koreans have spoken. Soldiers are handing over their military commanders. Hell! Near Toretsk. Exclusive footage from the very hell of war. Fiery, hot and cutting. Footage from the front lines. Watch right now. The bloody war continues, a war that Vladimir Putin and his pack have unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people continues in their fight for freedom. Hello, this is Front News. This is Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you, the next 30 minutes. You will get the truth about the war, which our journalists are uncovering from the hottest battle zones. So, are you ready? Then, we begin. And we start right away with exclusive material. While Russia is trying to advance in the Donetsk region, what else will we definitely talk about today? Ukraine is implementing its key strategy far beyond the front line, specifically in the Donetsk region. Deliver powerful strikes on military targets within the territory of the Russian Federation. From the latest drone strikes on Moscow, strikes on the Bryansk chemical plant, a strategic facility in the Tula region, and the Saratov region. Unique details about new, bright, and very effective strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation. Watch right now in the report by TSN Week journalist Oksana Rodionova.
Oh my, 7th, 8th, 9th, wow, it's really blazing already, 10, 12, 13, 14.
This was one of the largest long-range and most effective attacks on the facilities of the Russian military-industrial complex. To the enemy's rear,
It's flying a hell of a lot, really a hell of a lot. A lot is heading towards the city.
the geography of the strikes is extremely wide. Right away, 12 regions of enemy Russia shook from our long-range drones. And not just that, this will hit the factories. We need to go to the factory. The Bryansk chemical plant, located 120 kilometers from the front line, became the first successful target of the operation. According to TSN's own sources on Sunday at the Security Service of Ukraine, there were direct hits from the missiles and a lot of detonations afterwards.
These gear are the rockets hitting, look.
I'm going...
Well, you can't escape your fate.
At this facility, the enemy produces gunpowder, explosives, components for rocket fuel, and various munitions. In particular, shells for the MLRS, Grad, Tornado S, Smerch, and high-explosive aerial bombs. There, in the Bryansk region, our defenders once again reached the second electronics production enterprise in Russia, Silicon L. They also reached several strategically important enemy targets in Tula, including the Olekino chemical plant, which produces munitions, gunpowder, and materials for the Russian military-industrial complex, as well as the Tula Chermet enterprise. This is one of the largest producers of pig iron. Drones attacked Kazan. There was a chemical plant there. Urksyntes is the only Russian manufacturer of high-strength plastic and one of the largest producers of high and low-density polyethylene. We also reached the place where it was believed that the oil refining was protected, the KNPZ in Tatarstan, which is the main supplier of fuel beyond the Ural Mountains. There were explosions in the Saratov region. They hit the Saratov oil refiners. They were taken from the warehouse with FABs, KBs, and cruise missiles at the Engels airfield and the Crystal oil depot. They ignited the tanks with liquid aviation fuel for the Tu-160 bombers. This is high-density fuel. It has a characteristic rich yellow color of the exhaust. Due to its complexity, it is produced at only 2 factories in Irkutsk and Orenburg. This is a state reserve storage. The Russians were extinguishing it for 5 days, and then it was hit again right away. It seems our forces were trying to create logistical problems for the Russian aviation. It worked. Even if not everything burned down, the strike is daily. Russia was launching 60 to 70 bombs at Ukraine, and then it dropped to 3 times less.
What's the nuance? This fuel is very specific. As specialists say, you can't just go to, I don't know, the neighboring oil depot, Nikolai Achad in Georgia. No. It has certain viscosity properties because it's at high altitudes. And what we saw was a missile attack on Ukraine. I am more than convinced that this attack should have been a little earlier and B, a bit more extensive than what we saw. Planes are ready with missiles, but without fuel, no one is going anywhere. I'm sure it worked after hitting the Angel.
It was thought out down to the smallest detail. The attack had perfect coordination between the defense units, and there were quite a few involved. From intelligence to missile forces.
There has been a certain cataloging of objects by sectors of the economy based on the importance of enterprises for the Russian Federation. It allows for more careful planning and execution of attacks on the economy of the Russian Federation.
Not only do we identify where to strike, but also when. The Russians counted more than 200 drones, but it seems there were a lot more. They were hitting with various long-range drones and missiles.
The number of drones being produced and launched from our side has significantly increased. Here are these light missiles. Neptune, Yoruta, Polonitsia. There are questions about their guidance systems. We will compensate for the biggest problems with accuracy by using quantity because they will be cheap. But when we're talking about Neptune, there are technological developments that allow, roughly speaking, to hit the target with a slight deviation. And in fact, to approach the performance levels demonstrated by these Western missiles.
Developing an effective military for striking significant positions and using unconventional approaches helps systematically break down Russia's military potential. We're not taking a break. A drone. It's a drone. Wow, I actually jumped. It's like a moped. On Thursday night, Ukrainian drones hit the Lysky oil depot in the Voronezh region, which supplies fuel for the Russian army.
3 drones here.
And this Friday, the oil depot in the Kaluga region was hit like this.
From January to December 2024, after the Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil refineries, the systematic nature of the strikes and their consistency, we saw that 13% of Russian refinery capacities were idle. 13% is what has been recorded in the Russian economy. There are many enterprises that Ukraine hits again and again, sometimes even for the 4th time. So for you, the summary is that the systematic approach, the systematic nature, is really growing. Ukraine is not giving these enterprises a chance to recover on time. The situation doesn't give us a break, it's tough, but we're managing.
There won't be a corresponding result, for now, because the tactic of small cuts that our defenders have chosen has a cumulative effect. And the domino principle hasn't been cancelled. One day we will indeed push that critical stone.
And now, friends, let's talk about the infamous soldiers from North Korea, who not only fight unsuccessfully in Kursk, but also quite successfully end up in Ukrainian captivity. And you understand, the policy of Kim Jong-un's party for soldiers is that you have to kill yourself, and that's better than being captured. That's why Ukrainian military doctors have to make sure that these first captives don't take their own lives. After this, we hope that these footage can be exchanged for captured Ukrainian defenders. KTSN correspondent Natalia Nagorna will tell you all the details.
Right now, we are in the basement in the Sumy region. Right here is where the Frontline surgical team is located, which provided assistance to the first Korean captive. 1. To the Korean captive, 1. To the Korean captive, captive, 1. You've probably already seen this North Korean soldier when he was in the cell, but he was brought here from the battlefield in Kursk to the field hospital in the Sumy region.
The scheduled captive Korean was lying on this table.
Traumatologist Igor Anatolievich says he remembers the planned leg better than the captive himself, and he thinks he wasn't surprised by such a patient.
It used to be a little. This probably used to be. This probably is.
The first photos of the prisoner were also taken here. On his chest, there's a tag, a death notice, and a military ID. Without a photo. It states the year of birth as 1998. Place of birth, Republic of Tuva. Civil specialty tailor, not for women.
Antonian. It's probably time. I think Antonian, most likely, probably, yes, indeed.
He doesn't know either Russian or English. Of course. You seem calmer now. Of course, in the video, the North Korean looks scared. The Koreans have been fighting on the Severny Peninsula since the end of last year, but it's extremely difficult to capture them. Women usually do everything to avoid being captured alive. This one is considered to be worried precisely because of that.
We protected ourselves a bit.
I tied his hands so that we could examine him because he was resisting. He told us a little bit about something.
In the photos, he has his hands wrapped up. It's a way to save his life.
There have often been cases where they inflict harm upon themselves to avoid being captured.
This is not the typical fate of a North Korean soldier in Kursk. They were storming in large groups. In the drone footage, the dead remain in the thickets.
We carefully dressed him.
They immediately told him with the help of a translator that no one would harm him, so he should stay calm. We dressed him and then handed him over.
The second prisoner, who was a citizen of North Korea and was fortunate to receive help at another stabilization point. Now, this is yet another part of this crazy war that not long ago seemed unbelievable. Ukrainian medics in Sumy region will save the life of a North Korean soldier who was captured in Kursk.
Well, now it's time to analyze the situation. In the long-suffering Pokrovsk direction of the front, the enemy continues its military terror. The aggressors launched 45 attacks in the areas of Vodyen, Drua, Mirolyubivka, Mirnohrad, Promen, Lisovka, Novohrud, Uspenivka, Andriivka, Shevchenka, Dakhne, Ulakli, and Yantarny. Ukrainian defenders repelled 35 attacks. As a result of town airstrikes, there were casualties in Ulakli and Alexiivka. Yes, Russia has lost the initiative in the north. This is Kharkiv region, Sumy region, and also Kursk. President Zelensky stated this a week ago. The initiative remains with the Russians in the east. According to Zelensky, this is happening due to the slow staffing of Ukrainian brigades by Western partners. Where does the enemy most often attack? Why, exactly, Ukrainian troops are lacking. And journalist Oleksandr Zahorodny from the Sunday News will talk about the terrible losses, including the death of cameraman and volunteer Ruslan Hanushchak.
This is Russian armored vehicles burning in the east of Ukraine. And here they are advancing. Russian stormtroopers. They move like zombies when one of them is killed. Look, the other one doesn't even pay attention to it. He goes on to die himself exactly 50 seconds later. They... standing like zombies, waiting until a Ukrainian drone hits them squarely in the head. Some even bow to the Ukrainian drone. They are ready to kill themselves right away. As soon as a Ukrainian drone appears in the sky, even more so, they travel 1,000 kilometers just to come to a Ukrainian cemetery and die here. But only a few decide not to follow orders and not to storm the Ukrainian positions. And here's why. This Russian is hiding in the basement of the gray area between the two fronts, because he understands that death is lurking for him from both sides.
I am a serviceman, 429th Motorized Rifle Regiment. Please. We are being sent to storm practically without ammunition. Only 4 magazines per person.
And Russian soldiers are threatened with torture if they get captured.
We had a company commander who gave the order that we don't take prisoners and we don't surrender ourselves. So if you surrender, you'll either be tortured or end up on a yacht.
The number of destroyed Russian soldiers is shocking. This is how a Russian prisoner describes his first and last battle.
They said to go through the forest strip. If everything is clear, move on to the next forest strip. Many dead. Around every bunker there are dead. 8 people. There are only 2 of us left alive. We huddled in the bunker. Our comrade was shot at the entrance. And Alexander, a serviceman of the armed forces of Ukraine, had his machine gun jammed. He couldn't move the bolt, but we immediately raised our hands and surrendered.
But the Russians are still advancing. It's been 15 months in a row. Their tactics on the front are simple but effective. Russian stormtroopers advance in small groups into the gray zone. If they encounter serious resistance from our troops, they drop planning bombs from airplanes that destroy everything living and then seep forward again. The task of the enemy's maximum is not even Pokrovsk or Chasov.
To bypass Pokrovsk from the left, basically they are trying to do this. It seems to me that the fighters have a tactic for suppression. They need to bypass and suppress. Here they are trying to bypass Pokrovsk. If you connect a straight line from Pokrovsk to Chasiv Yar, look at what kind of cauldron could be there. An approximate depth very roughly is 1,200 square kilometers.
From Pokrovsk to Chasiv Yar, it's 65 kilometers. Now it all depends. Only our defense will withstand it. This pressure will only be withstood by these KM. The suburb of Chasiv Yar, here, the defense is held by the fighters of the 24th Separate Mechanized Brigade. The commander with the pseudonym Yuri states that the enemy is attacking in small groups, sometimes even in pairs, but practically without stopping, both day and night. That's why people are exhausted. The enemy is accumulating their reserves right here. And his unit really lacks well-trained recruits. A fighter with the pseudonym Kuzya is specifically responsible for the additional training of newly arrived fighters in the brigade. He says that if there's time, they work with each one for up to 2. We have our own training ground.
There we train them for more combat conditions. It's important to properly manage trench armament. Weeks. The shells were attracted there because the terrain is flat. It's with turns. They throw grenades just like that. They usually only throw dummy or training grenades, and a live grenade is psychological. So a person takes the grenade and their hands start shaking.
Right now, Putin is trying to push as deep as possible into Ukrainian territory. They managed to hold back the toothless onslaught, but at the cost of losses. This week, a journalist documentarian, our colleague, Warrior, and also a TCH cameraman, Ruslan Hanushchak, was killed at the front. He was filming a movie about the revolution of dignity, about the Ilovai's cauldron. He fought in the glorious 92nd Brigade in the strike drone unit Kot 9-2. But at the beginning of the larger war, he worked together with journalist Andriy Tsaplienko. He was the one who saved Andriy's life during the enemy rocket attack.
This is just such a surname operator.
This is such an operator. Just such an operator. Well, a journalist dreams of such operators, but he was a friend, very close. And he saved my life when we came under fire near Chernihiv. And he was the first to hear the rocket flying, and he shouted, "Get down!" I will always be grateful to him for that for the rest of my days.
Ruslan is being buried to the mournful singing. Trimbit, he was from Frankivsk region and loved the mountains very much. I just want to give you the business seekers. I just want to read to you what else buyer duplicates.
I just want to read what I pee. I just want to read to you what he wrote just before his death. This is our correspondence. I decided to enlist because I felt that I could do something more for my people, for my country. Here at the front I am free. Free from the fear of death. You're not bothered by the little things. It's an unmatched feeling of freedom. A tribute to the hero. Heroes never die. How many?
Have farewells only taken place here at Independence Square. War truly takes the best and the dearest. Ukraine is paying an incredibly high price in this war. The only thing that can calm us down, that all of this is not in vain.
And now we move to the Kramatorsk and Toretsk directions of the front. The bloody frenzy of the enemy's army continues. In the Kramatorsk direction, the enemy has stormed the positions of Ukrainian defenders twice in the area of Chasovye Yar. The fighting continues. The Toretsk direction, 8 enemy attacks were directed at our troops' positions near Delivka, Krimske, and Toretsk. 1. Confrontation continues. The enemy also carried out airstrikes through Konstantinivka and Nelipivka. Yes, in the Toretsk area there is a real hell right now. The occupiers are advancing and pushing Ukrainian defenders back more and more. In this direction, everything is working in the armed forces of Ukraine. From heavy artillery to heavy machine guns. The aggressors, for their part, are actively using FPV drones on fiber optics, which are not visible. Ukrainian Arabes. Exclusive details right now in a report from the Frontline by TSN journalist Ruslan Yarmolyuk.
Little drone, it's flying. Let's go in quickly.
And run.
This is Valery, a 42-year-old man from Kherson. He survived the occupation and even went through loss. Now he's fighting near Toretsk. That's not the word to climb.
No kidding, they're really pushing in. They might think or hope that Trump or America is over there. There will be some kind of stop for some reason. Well, maybe they want to take a bit of territory.
In this calculation, all were former civilians. Douglas is 29 and he was an economist.
It was harder to change the image, the life, so to speak. Everything changed drastically from a civilian face to a military one. If you hadn't even been in mandatory service before this, it was tough. for a while, but then we adapted and that was it.
Toretsk is in ruins. The enemy is pushing with assaults every day, dozens of times.
For Odessa. Shot.
Fights in Toretsk are happening for every house. In this video, you can see that the fighting continues in the apartment. A tank and support from Vidu are heading to help our guys.
Different targets, concentrations of manpower, deployment locations, takeoff points, pilot reconnaissance. There, if we notice something where they are gathering, where there might be some warehouses, we hit specific points. Where we notice that they are moving.
The cannonade around the positions doesn't let up, and shells and mines are flying to and from our guys. And there's also a swarm of drones.
Where there is war, there is danger everywhere. Every second. This is where most of it is happening right now. It's a time of war, where videos, drones, and enemy artillery are working very well.
The enemy is moving over the bodies of their own. They're spreading out through the city, securing themselves in the basements. They're gathering people and then moving on to the assault.
A shot.
Assaults are still ongoing. Toretsk, our infantry guys are repelling the attacks and our mortar and machine gunners are supporting them, so that the defenders can hold their positions. In the extreme high-rises, assault troops are entrenched, flushing them out with heavy machine guns.
Quite often they are constantly moving. When regrouping, we open fire on command.
53 years old. Victor never thought he would become a machine gunner. He left a successful business at home and went to war.
I worked as a system administrator, but on top of that, I was a sole proprietor doing repairs and maintenance of computer equipment.
The machine gunners are scattering the ruins where the occupiers are hiding. The intensity of the fighting is high, as evidenced by the empty boxes from the cartridges. It's even harder for our infantry guys because they are facing many enemies and tanks that are leveling the city.
Well, now let's analyze the situation on the Kharkiv and Kupiansk fronts. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. In the Kharkiv direction, there was one combat clash. Enemy aviation attacked Kazacha Lopan, Turiv, and Mali Prokody with guided bombs, while Krasny Yar was hit by unguided air missiles. Kupiansk direction, Ukrainian forces repelled 5 assaults from the occupiers near Dvorekne, Zarizove, and Petropavlivka. 3 clashes are still ongoing. And now about another act of genocide against peaceful Ukrainians by Putin's Russia. A brutal strike on the capital. The enemy struck Kyiv, first with Shaheds and in the morning with Iskanders. As a result of this Russian ballistic attack on Kyiv, 3 people were killed. 3 more. There were also reports of shelling in the city, falling debris, and damage to infrastructure, particularly one of the metro stations. All the details are in the report from the news service correspondents.
Every summer, the water supply is a problem, the plumbing is not working properly, and there are hundreds of issues. Well, the victim was hit by a piece from 3 village rockets. And these are the fragments? There are such cargoes lying around here now. Rescuers arrived within a few minutes. The fire raged in 3 vehicles, mostly in the minibus.
As a result of the enemy attack, we have damage to a business center, a store, an administrative building, and 10 cars. 3 rescuers have already been lost in the fire. Unfortunately, we have 3 deceased people. There are also 3 injured, calling for help from the medics.
There was a woman and a man in the minibus, but they couldn't be saved. Another victim turned out to be a guy who was at the entrance of the Lukyanivka metro at the moment of the strike. He was just running to the shelter, or maybe he was just coming out of it, because after the night alarm due to the Shaheds, the all clear was just announced according to witnesses.
And the air alert was cancelled. The all clear was announced, we opened the store, and then there were incoming strikes.
It was a strike with Iskander-M ballistic missiles as reported by the Ukrainian Air Forces. According to Yuri Inat, one of the missiles was shot down at a low altitude, so the warhead detonated already on the ground. That's where these injuries come from. The aftermath of this latest Russian terrorist strike required the operational services to work all day, and even into the evening.
And now we move to the Novopavlivka front direction. We will be open. This is yet another sacred target for Putin and his gang. Accordingly, the situation here is heated to the limit. In the Novopavlivka direction, 3 enemy assaults were repelled. Overall, the occupiers attacked 5 times in the areas of Novodarivka, Konstantinivka, and Greater Novosilka. Airstrikes have also been recorded on the settlements of Andriivka and Novopil. Novodarivka and Konstantinivka were targeted using guided aerial bombs. Chasiv Yar. This bridge has long become a symbol of resilience, heroism, and bravery of the Ukrainian armed forces. Right now, in the Chasiv Yar area, the enemy is destroying all the villages and access roads around. The Sapper unit of the 24th Separate Mechanized Brigade, under the explosions of hit shells, is trying to clear the rural road for access is blocked by scattered munitions that the occupiers are sowing all around. This work allows both the military and a few civilians to pass through. Still remaining near the city, the correspondent of SN, Ruslan Yarmolyuk, spoke with the Ukrainian defenders.
One input, to promote the confounding of the enemy. Another input, inhuman links. One input capturing. There are fewer and fewer people like Irina in the villages near Chasiv Yar. People are running away from the war. Come in, here. So come in here. Everything around is shattered by shells, artillery, and FPV drones. There are no intact houses left on the street. All the roads are torn apart by craters.
We arrived at the site where an enemy FPV truck was blown up. As a result of the explosion, artillery ammunition was scattered. At the moment, reconnaissance is underway, then we will destroy them.
Army sappers, while the sky is relatively clear of enemy UAVs, are clearing a rural road.
We collected all the shells that were lying on the road. This is so that peaceful people can pass through, just as you saw.
Burned shells are being taken to a pit on the roadside. They can't be transported because they are already armed. It's going to be hard for the vehicle to get in because enemy drones are hanging everywhere.
Don't be afraid, only fools and the dead.
From time to time, enemy shells occasionally explode in the fields around, so we need to work expeditiously and frequently.
The challenge for the sapper is that a lot of things are coming in from all sides.
Sappers are throwing shells and blocking the road from both sides to prevent criminal people from being endangered. And they blow up.
So we neutralized the munition. Here's the crater we ended up with. There were 13 shells here.
Sappers are working both at zero line and on the second line. We need to mine areas in front of the enemies and clear the roads for our own, while constantly deceiving them. Death. Relatives are waiting at home.
My family is waiting at home, so I believe everything will be fine. I worry the most about my brothers in arms.
I'm really worried about my comrades. The sappers return, and Aunt Yulia remains in the village, which is very close to Yar's time. She stays with the dog and thoughts about another night that needs to be survived.
That's all for today, but very soon the Front News program will feature new unique materials from our journalists from the hottest spots of the war, to make sure you know the truth. You were with Volodymyr Tymoshenko. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.